What you know, alibis? Welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. It's Wednesday, July 16th. This may not go out until Thursday, July 17th. And the reason, y'all, Grammy thought me, the biggest tomboy on earth, would be a good candidate to cut and color her hair. Actually, it went pretty good. She was happy, but y'all, I had shaky hands the whole time. I was like, don't screw it up. Don't gap that hair. She wanted to get pretty for her follow-up appointment tomorrow, and we made it happen. But that's why we're a little late tonight. Thanks for all the good wishes for my dad who had surgery on his artery today in his abdomen. I tell you, we are definitely in this season of life where like everybody's got something funky going on and it needs to move on. But the good thing, everybody's doing well and headed in the right direction. So that's all we could ask for. So on this episode, we're going to go through a motion that was filed way back. And this is when Kouri was asking the judge to sever some charges. And the judge did grant some severance. So what is she going to be tried for in February? What are the charges that the jury will have to decide whether she's guilty or not? Aggravated murder, attempted criminal homicide. There's 2 counts of false and fraudulent insurance claims, and then forgery. And just a reminder, the state did dismiss 2 charges of drug distribution. The court severed 4 charges in November of last year. Those were 2 charges of mortgage fraud and then 2 charges of forgery. However, the 26 new charges that we just went over last week, those stem from the mortgage fraud and the forgery charges that were severed. So those are back and in a big way. And the reason those 4 charges are included in the new 26 charges is that when the court severed them, the state had to decide whether or not they were going to pursue those charges. So they filed those 4 severed charges and added 22 more that they found relating to Kouri's financial crimes. I fully believe she's going to throw Eric under the bus and try to say that he took this stuff in spite of the fact that there is tons of evidence that she bought fentanyl. And given the timing of those requests with the attempted murder and the murder, it seems really likely she was the one that poisoned him. But that's why we have trial. So let's go through this. In Kouri's filing, she talks about a joinder of multiple felonies is allowed if it's based on the same conduct or connected in their commission. She cites 404B that says care must be taken in joining offenses for a single trial so that joinder is not misused to deprive a defendant of a fair trial upon an offense by joining different offenses so that evidence concerning charges unrelated in time and nature, which would normally not be admissible upon a trial, could be admitted as to the multiple offenses in an effort to stigmatize the defendant and thus make it questionable that the jury would give a fair and dispassionate consideration to the evidence. In Kouri's filing, it says the application of law to specific counts 1 and 2. Count 2 alleges Kouri attempted to commit aggravated murder of her husband on February 14th, 2022 for monetary gain and or by the administration of a lethal substance in a lethal dose, allegedly fentanyl. Count 4 charges Kouri with distribution of a controlled substance on the same day. Based on the allegation, she provided a lethal controlled substance, allegedly fentanyl, to her husband in connection with his attempted murder. These alleged offenses in counts 2 and 4 occurred 18 days prior to Eric's death charged in counts 1 and 3. The Utah Supreme Court has previously held that 3 thefts spread over a period of 18 days did not meet the definition of a single criminal episode, and their joinder for trial was unduly prejudicial. As the court heard during the preliminary hearing, there is no physical, medical, or direct evidence to establish whether Eric actually ingested any controlled substance on February 14th. In fact, there's evidence to the contrary. Eric believed he was having an allergic reaction to something. There's also no direct evidence established that Kouri distributed a controlled substance to her husband on February 14th. Therefore, the state cannot establish the acts alleged in counts 2 and 4 were part of a common scheme or plan with counts 1 and 3, as there's insufficient evidence to establish what, if any, acts were carried out by Kouri on February 14th, and how they compared, if at all, to her alleged acts on the day of Eric's death. The filing mentions it would be prejudicial to Kouri if the jury were allowed to consider two separate alleged acts involving an alleged intent to cause death. The allegations connected to February 14th are wholly speculative and circumstantial. I'm not doing this word for word, by the way. I'm just going through the major points made by Kouri in her filing, then we'll do the state. They go over the mortgage fraud and her misleading mortgage lenders by providing altered bank statements and say that that happened over a year prior to Eric's death. Now we move on to the state's opposition to Sever, and y'all, they threw shade in a big way. The state joined all 9 offenses in a single information because they're directly connected by Kouri's motive for financial gain and the world to view her as an accomplished person of status. The offenses Kouri seeks to sever precipitated other offenses and an arc of the defendant's increasingly aggressive, parasitic behavior connects all 9 offenses. The aggravated murder and attempted aggravated murder are part of a common scheme or plan. Their argument: the state may join offenses when certain criteria are met. The state is entitled to put the offenses in context by shedding light on Kouri's conduct and the surrounding circumstances of the crimes in a way that's lost when the offenses are considered separately. The state properly joined all 9 offenses. The attempted aggravated murder and the mortgage frauds and related forgeries are properly joined with the other offenses because all 9 offenses are indeed connected together in their commission. Additionally, the attempted aggravated murder is properly joined with the aggravated murder because those 2 offenses are part of a common scheme or plan. To understand how all the offenses are connected together in their commission, the court must first understand the defendant. Kouri Darden Richins is a woman aggrieved by her own perception regarding her place in society. Shortly before the aggravated murder, Kouri expressed this grievance in a text message to her longtime lover, Josh Grossman. The text says, "When I was little, I grew up scrubbing other people's toilets in Park City at rich people's houses after school. Christmas breaks, all summer, I worked for my aunt's company. I was just always looked down upon because you're literally the person cleaning toilets. I always said to myself and my aunt, one day I'll own properties in Park City like all these rich, snooty people, and I will never be like them. Nah, you're gonna be worse, girl." Allegedly. "Tomorrow I close on 3 properties all in the same day, 2 being in Park City. That's a huge deal to me. Biggest accomplishment to date career-wise. It's never been about the money. It's about being able to say I too can have properties in Park City and you're not better than anyone the way you treat people and I can prove it. Tomorrow is a really big deal for me, self-accomplishment wise." Continuing with the state's response, Kouri wants others to view her as an accomplished person of status. She projected an image of accomplishment and status to business associates, friends, family, and falsely touting that she acquired $14 million in real estate in 5 years, profited $1 million in 5 projects, and employed 147 people based out of Park City. She paid for vacations with friends and doled out cash to family members. She purchased a home for her best friend and carried the mortgage. Kouri's, and it's in quotes, accomplishments and status, however, were an elaborate facade. She created and perpetuated the facade by parasitically appropriating Eric's financial resources. She extracted Eric's premarital home equity and available credit. She fraudulently traded on his company's liquidity to borrow for her business and relied on his company's liquidity to salvage her Oakley project. In reality, the defendant was insolvent when she sent Mr. Grossman the text message on November 29, 2021. When Kouri closed on the 3 properties on November 30th, 2021, she added $1.1 million of high-interest debt to her already staggering and unserviceable debt load. By that day, she had already defaulted on one loan and was delinquent on several others. One of the defendant's lenders sued her on December 9th, 2021. At the same time, she continued efforts to borrow from new high-interest lenders to meet her existing obligations. On December 23rd, 2021, she contracted to purchase the unfinished Midway mansion using $2.9 million in high-interest debt, even though she lacked the financial ability to service the additional debt or rehabilitate the property. By the end of 2021, she stood on the precipice of total financial collapse and exposure of her accomplishment and status facade. To protect and perpetuate her facade, Kouri needed Eric's $5 million estate and $1.35 million from his life insurance proceeds. Kouri needed to cause Eric's death. She would not have fraudulently applied for a new policy to insure Eric's life, contracted to purchase the unfinished Midway mansion, and planned for a future with Mr. Grossman at the Midway mansion unless she also planned to cause Eric's death. Kouri needed Eric's estate and life insurance proceeds to satisfy her creditors and thus concealed that she had fraudulently obtained several mortgages. They go on to say the evidence supporting each of the offenses establishes a readily discernible direct relationship between all 9 offenses. Considering the offenses together, the defendant's parasitic behavior forms an arc of increasingly aggressive, risky, opportunistic, and bold actions required to perpetuate her facade of accomplishment and success. An arc from frauds involving property, through frauds implicating a human life, to the attempted taking of a human life, to the taking of a human life. The attempted aggravated murder and the aggravated murder are also properly joined because they follow a common scheme or plan. They involve a similar fact pattern. In each instance, Kouri purchased fentanyl from Carmen Lauber a few days before administering it to Eric. She administered the fentanyl orally and then left Eric alone so she would not be with him when he died. Her motive throughout was to appropriate Eric's estate and life insurance proceeds to protect and perpetuate her facade of accomplishment and status. The parallel fact pattern between these offenses demonstrates the existence of a calculated plan. Any divergence in fact pattern simply reflects the lessons that Kouri learned from the attempted aggravated murder. The attempted aggravated murder and the murder are 17 days apart. Here, when considered in the context of Kouri's parasitic behavioral arc, 17 days is temporally proximate. The defendant's chief complaint seems to be that much of the evidence supporting joinder of the attempted aggravated murder is circumstantial. Circumstantial evidence, of course, is just as viable as direct evidence. Finally, the defendant's argument to sever the attempted aggravated murder is internally inconsistent. She argues that, on the one hand, the state's evidence is too insignificant to support a common scheme, and on the other hand, the state's evidence is so significant that its prejudice cannot be overstated. It cannot be both. The defendant has the difficult burden of demonstrating prejudice, yet she does not even attempt a prejudice analysis under Utah code and relevant case law. Instead, she relies on conclusory assertions that the prejudice cannot be overstated and would be profound. Kouri has not demonstrated prejudice as a matter of law. Utah Rules of Evidence 404B2 permits the admission of other crimes, wrongs, or acts if offered for non-character purposes, such as proving motive, intent, preparation, plan, knowledge, identity, absence of mistake, and lack of accident. 2 similar poisonings within 19 days proves the defendant's intent to cause Eric Richins' death. The defendant's lessons learned from the attempted aggravated murder prove the defendant's knowledge that she was going to need to administer a lot of fentanyl quickly to cause Eric's death. Additionally, the evidence supporting the attempted aggravated murder proves the defendant's motive, intent, plan, and absence of mistake or accident in relation to the insurance fraud and related forgery. Kouri attempted to cause Eric Richins' death in part to receive the insurance proceeds. At bottom, the defendant needed Eric Richins' estate and life insurance proceeds to satisfy her creditors and thus concealed that she had fraudulently obtained several mortgages and was in financial distress. Here, the evidence supporting the attempted aggravated murder is relevant as to the remaining offenses. The evidence proving that the defendant attempted to cause Eric Richins' death to take his estate and life insurance proceeds to perpetuate her facade of accomplishment and status makes it more probable that 19 days later, she successfully caused his death for the exact same reasons. Her motivation in each instance is identical. They go on to say that there is digital evidence and testimony from her housekeeper and evidence supporting Kouri's motive, intent, and absence of mistake or accident. The forgeries and the mortgage fraud charges can stand alone, but context and the arc of the defendant's increasingly aggressive, parasitic behavior is lost if they're severed. So even though this is not a new filing, I wanted to read this because the state threw some major shade. That's it for this episode. If there are any new filings in Kouri's case, I will bring those to you as soon as I can. Hope you guys have a good rest of your evening, and we will see you soon.